Welcome to the Good Luck Club podcast. We aim to bring you insights from the world's most successful entrepreneurs and change makers. They will share with you each week what they've learned building their businesses, the good and the bad. There is nothing more interesting than real life stories. My guest today is entrepreneur Norris, founder and CEO of Monese. Norris, good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Simon, for inviting me. Very happy to be here.
I wonder if we could start off the podcast by you telling my audience a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. How long have you got? I've got rather sort of a long story, but so basically I'm in early 40s, originally from a tiny country called Estonia, which is what I call a land of unicorns because the concentration of unicorns there is number one in the world. But aside from the country itself, I'm also from a very tiny little small and as a family never really had much money and sort of coming from very, very humble beginnings. But fast forward into where we are today, I've built a number of businesses in the past sort of 15 years or so and mostly in financial services actually and technology. So fintech, I guess, is my thing. And Monese, as you mentioned, is basically a digital banking service that has been around for about 5 years. This is my latest venture, and the idea is that we are making banking just so much easier for people and removing many of the complexities that are, holding people back.
I was just looking online. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. You've got over 2 million users.
Yeah, you're correct. It's actually significantly more right now. We haven't published recent figures, but the business has been growing incredibly fast over the past few years, and it's only feels like it's still only maybe few percent done. So it's very early still for us.
Very impressive what you've done, and you're revolutionizing the industry. Can you tell me a little bit what success means to you personally today and for your business? How do you measure success?
I guess there are three aspects really that I would like to highlight. Is that number one, and I think it wasn't necessarily in that order some few years ago, but today, my personally, I would say number one is it may sound a little lame, to be honest, especially a little younger than I would say the kind of good people around you, and not just the family, obviously, whose support is insanely important, but also basically work with people who you actually like is a key, I think, who bring the best out of you. And sometimes, you can have a little argument here and there and take a little bit of a beating and people disagreeing with you. But if it's sort of a prompts action and sort of a little bit of a spark, then it can be a good thing. So I say good people is something that I would define. If I would die, drop dead today, if I had the chance to work with brilliant people who I like working with and the family around me, you can die any day and not regret a thing, That's number one. Second is I would say that it's a pretty big thing for me is the word freedom. So, when I sort of escaped that little town to the big city, I eventually landed in London and all that. So it's for me, this is a little bit of a revolution that has been ongoing for years for me, and kind of a breaking free from chains and sort of boundaries and proving people wrong, and also a little bit of a financial freedom in there as well. I think this is something that I've been very sort of passionate about, and this eventually, when I break free, will it ever be complete freedom? I don't know, but being free, truly free, is a success for me. And also when we talk about businesses, so for example, why I'm an entrepreneur is because it gives me the freedom. A lot of freedom, so I can not only define my own working hours, which happen to be 16 hours a day normally, but I choose my time, I choose my affairs, and sometimes being an entrepreneur is, yes, it is much riskier, but if you get it right, the rewards there it can be pretty good, and it's incredibly liberating to work on something that you actually want to do, and you're not doing it only for money, for example. And I guess. Now that I'm in my early 40s, I would say that the impact is number three word that I kind of connect to the word success. So myself, I've been a vegetarian for like 15 years of my life because of, I worry about impact. I worry about what kind of a world we leave behind. I've got, quite a few kids as well. So kind of worry about that and trying to do a good thing, trying to do something that really impacts, people around me and as many people as possible positively. It's a kind of a thing that really prompted me to actually create Monese, which is very, very much focusing right now on making sure that, there is a good service, a good product that actually enables people to, thrive, the freedom to thrive, not worry about the finances so much, reduce the stress and mental health that come with, poor money management. So all that is I would say if I do these three things, good people, get myself in a place where I can be breaking free from things like finances and whatnot, and the impact as well, then that's it for me. That's the most important.
You've just described my personal utopia as well. I mean, it's those three things, such great insights for my listeners. I think wisdom that probably has taken you a few decades to come to terms with. Right? I mean, I imagine the 20-year-old you. What was the 20-year-old you like?
A bit reckless, I would say. So, I really wish I should have started the business and being an entrepreneur when I was in my early 20s. I've seen so many people right now, youngers who start much earlier, who, get a little bit of an education, and sort of smart people who start much sooner. So, early 20s is the best time, right? I mean, if you don't have kids, you don't have any mortgages, all this stuff that is kind of holding you back, it's so much easier. And I started really kind of in late 30s, I would say, sort of a mid 30s. And, I was married, I had my first child. And then, when I started Monese, I mean, I had two more young kids. And I was the only provider in the family. And, creating this insanely risky business at the time that was pretty crazy idea at the time as well. I mean, it's just I wish I started all this in my 20s.
It's a very interesting point. What made you leap into self-employment? What happened?
I guess I had a little bit of a kind of a life-changing event. So first of all, I kind of started reading a lot about sort of a financial education, like Robert Kiyosaki talking about kids education. How do you build through property? How you can build a little bit of a financial freedom. So I actually started doing that letter by letter, and before I knew it, I was actually financially free. So I paid off all my sort of a uni debt and credit cards, and I was pretty reckless in 20s. And when I say that, I mean like literally I borrowed money from credit card companies. I borrowed money to get me through 10 plus years of universities. So when this was all done, I had this massive pile of debt, and that I carried so many years on my shoulders. And when I got through this, when I got it done, it was a game-changing event for me, and from that moment onwards, sort of, I just really decided that I never ever want to go back to this. And actually, I did a little bit more even as a result as well. So I thought, not only I don't want to go back to this ever again myself, I thought, why is why is not educational system providing more information to youngsters about sort of money? Why are we jumping to university debt? Why is nobody talking about how dangerous things can become? So I decided to do something about it. And when I had this sort of a little bit of a breakthrough, yes, I was financially worry free, but I was not really rich or anything. So, but I decided to set up kind of a foundation, which is called Arta Foundation, and that is built basically to take whatever cash I have and will have in the future, and I'm basically investing into financial education of children. So basically, the foundation has been up and running in Estonia for quite a few years, 6, 7, 8 years right now, and this is kind of a lifelong thing. So I want to basically make sure that I have through this foundation, I can have an impact on the, educating youngsters about money as well. And there is one more thing I did on that topic, if I may. Basically, with some other founders from Estonia, like let's say TransferWise founders and Bolt founders, some other people, we actually created a philanthropy fund, €1 million fund that is called the Good Deed Education Fund, which basically is spreading the cash basically in 3 years in order to provide seed capital for innovative initiatives that are supposed to turn Estonian education around, for example. So things like this are really something that I see that are gonna, this is important for me, and sort of this is where hopefully when, maybe my entrepreneurial episode is going to be over at some point, then this is where I want to put a lot of focus in the future as well.
That's wonderful to hear, giving back like that and realizing I couldn't agree more. I think in education in general, it's ridiculous that the financial piece isn't taught to kids. Entrepreneurship isn't taught to kids. I mean, a lot of what entrepreneurship is a set of skills, isn't it? I mean, it's kind of crazy to me that's not taught. So it's great that you've set up that foundation to try and bring that to the younger generation. Was it hard to set up a foundation out of interest?
I think setting up is not that hard. It's like a little bit like setting up a company. I mean, you can do it in 10 minutes or half an hour, but how you kind of take it, how you keep it going, and how do you get people there who actually keep it going? That's another matter. And with the foundation, I knew it's going to be lifelong journey, so I didn't massively rush, and initially it was kind of I didn't do very much, but at some point a professional team emerged, and kids were actually being sort of educated, and that was pretty amazing. But it's still sort of constantly needs kind of a nurturing and making sure it doesn't kind of slow down. So I think it's as I said, ongoing thing.
That's great. It's a wonderful thing to plan for. I think a lot of people will relate to what you're talking about, especially my young audience who do come out of university with debt, and they want to start something of their own, but they are labelled with this debt. It does feel like a trap, right? So you managed to build your way out of it. I think a lot of people will be interested in a book around that. You should probably release a book. Sounds like there's a big story about how to make that happen.
It took so many years. It took so many years. So I really encourage people to approach this systematically. If you apply system there and you're careful with things, you can be out in no time.
So when you decided to start your own first business, when was that? What was the first business that you actually said, right, this a for-profit business?
It was a tiny business, basically. It was, me and my friends, we wanted to, again, sort of, not be employed by somebody else. So we wanted to do our own business. And it was 3 friends setting up a little kind of, I did websites. Another friend of mine was a computer teacher. And another one basically built computers as a hardware. So 3 of us, we created this little business. And, that was my start. So I was a website builder, basically.
So this is very important, I think, for people to listen to. You as a founder of a new kind of bank, a CEO, successful entrepreneur, we all have to start somewhere, right? So that first business, was it just simply you didn't want to work for someone else, or was it the vision piece that you now have has taken time to mature, right? For a lot of young people, again, I think they sometimes think that the first business they do has got to be this brilliant visionary thing, but it's not always best to do it that way, right? Step by step.
Yeah, interesting enough, they say also that when you look at the common sort of misunderstanding is that the most successful founders or let's say companies are built by very young founders, which is not actually true. So when you look at data, you will find that actually many people who are successful, they actually have built multiple businesses, smaller businesses before, and only it starts really going really, really well when they have a little bit of an experience. Under the belt as well. So I think I've done, failed and tried many things, and, built kind of started businesses. I think I've started, created maybe 30 plus businesses, but most of them super, super tiny and never took really off. And I think only when I look hard and look back, I mean, Monese right now is the best one that has really taken off, and lots of people believe in it. Team, obviously your customers and investors as well. So it's pretty sizable now.
But in a way, you had to do those 29 plus businesses before that to be able to build what you've got today. That's your education in a way, isn't it? That's how you've figured out how to do
it. Absolutely. And I mean, also, I think it's important to be through this experience, and some people pick it up much quicker than I did, but it's just enormously important to kind of learn to push yourself through basically outside your comfort zone. For some people, it comes more naturally. And I would say if you're younger, then also it comes more naturally to you. Because, if you get a little bit older, perhaps you have been beaten down a little bit, and maybe you're you've got family and you don't want to take risks anymore. And, you tend to fall into your comfort zone. But I think if you have been experimenting, you have created these businesses, then I think it's very important to push yourself outside that comfort zone on daily basis and push through fear as well. Because one of my things that I didn't tell you before, but I was I couldn't even speak properly before. I mean, I had enormous self-confidence issues, couldn't look people in the eye, couldn't speak. Public speaking was death, literally. And it took me so much work with myself to actually get through this. And I guess a big aha moment for me was I don't know, 7, 8, 10, something like that years ago, when I realized that actually I started thinking, so what is the worst things that can happen if I fail on something? Let's say I want to create a business and then, it's a ridiculous idea. Everybody will laugh, call me stupid. And, it's okay, actually, right? But because you're not going to die in that process. What is a little bit of a humiliation? Without humiliation, no good things have been brought to the world. And once you get rid of this fear of being ridiculed or death even, then it's like, okay, I mean, if I'm not going to die, there could be a little bit of money in the game that you could potentially lose, but you can always make more money, right? And once you get rid of this fear, you can do anything. That's what I understood, and it took me long time, many years. But as a result, I guess we're pushing a lot of boundaries right now as a business and as an entrepreneur. And without that sort of loss of fear, I think probably many businesses would never see the light of day.
It's very inspiring, you sharing that with us. I think, as I say, your image as a successful entrepreneur is out there. So when you share, where you've come from to where you are today, I think for a lot of people listening that perhaps do struggle with what they see as their weaknesses, overcoming them and pushing through, you can come out the other side and conquer the world. I love the point about kind of leaning into fear and not and pushing through. I think that's really powerful. I actually think your point you're making about death is really interesting too, because I had suddenly a personal fear of flying, and I actually remember thinking, well, I don't know why. I think after 9/11 attacks, I watched planes flying into buildings so much. Something happened in my subconscious, and I started getting scared of flying. And then the way I overcame it was by basically saying, well, if I die, what's my legacy? So if I get on this plane today and I die, what's my legacy? And that actually motivated me to work harder and create a legacy, create something that, a mark, so that if I did die on the plane, at least I left something interesting behind. So that embracing death is really interesting. It can motivate you, right? I mean, we only get one life, so you might as well go out there and take as bigger risks as you can, right?
Exactly. And I've gone to graveyards and sort of walked around and sort of really thought it through, and also that led me to a point that's in one stage where I just, I thought, okay, you can never know what the next day will bring you. Will you ever achieve your ultimate goals? I happen to have lots of goals. Will I achieve them? And what's going to happen if I don't achieve? So basically trying to live every day right now as it's my last. It's not easy. But I mean, if you do your little things, a little bit, spend time with your family a little bit every day, take care of your health a little bit, read, try to eat good food and sort of not stress too much. and I really like to take a massive stress on, and it's very difficult for me to kind of break out of that sort of a pattern. But if you kind of do these little things every single day, and you work towards your ultimate goal, then it's actually okay if you at some point, I don't know, whatever happens, and it's important to enjoy the path, the journey, and whether you ever reach the end point is almost irrelevant, really.
A lot of people reach out and talk about how they want to start their own business, but they have kids and a family. You mentioned it earlier. Start as young as you can because you don't have all those responsibilities. But for those that do, I mean, you started this business when you had a family. How did you correlate that? Did you have to get buy-in from your partner? Was it a long conversation? Was it a short conversation? And then how do you balance it out?
By the time I kind of married my wife, I had been an entrepreneur, kind of a modestly successful entrepreneur for a number of years. And the uncertainty that I already had before that was kind of like a norm. So my wife and family already knew that sort of uncertainty, and it didn't come as a surprise. But what I did promise to my wife when I started this business, Monese, was that I'm not going to be risking my own money anymore. So I promised to my wife that I'm going to be raising all the money from other people and investors. I did break that promise because initially, I think the first sort of a year and a half, I actually paid all the bills myself. So I kind of kept it a little bit quiet. So I did actually, use a fair amount of our savings as well. I didn't have to remortgage our house or anything. And I did raise the other money from friends, family, start as a starting point, and then obviously from angels and professional venture capital firms as well. But it was pretty sort of an interesting conversation, I guess, with my wife initially, because as I said, so I had 3 kids at the time, and 2 of them were young, newborn. Pretty much, and but she was very sensible about it. Luckily, otherwise we wouldn't probably be here today.
Well, I think I always say to people who want to become entrepreneurs, you've got to have the right partner in life to back up that desire and that drive that you have as an entrepreneur. That's key to actually unlocking being an entrepreneur. So I feel blessed to have a partner that's like that. You sound like you're blessed to have a partner like that. But it is an interesting one. I also think it's very interesting you talk about risking your own money. I think it's kind of a struggle for entrepreneurs, isn't it? Because I think surprisingly asking for money isn't that easy. And if you can, but I think what you're doing is so big you can't financially. I don't think anyone can financially build the sort of business you're building on your own. Plus the partners you brought in can add value. That's the big thing. Like we know each other through Outward VC. Just quick shout out to those guys. I know they've invested in you, but ultimately actually can bring so much value to the table if you actually have outside money coming in as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's initially I would also advise that people, if they have day jobs, don't leave that day job go, keep it. And then you do your thing in the evenings and you spend a little bit more and more time. And when it kind of seems like it's actually going to take off, or there is any kind of external funding already, only then maybe let go. But I let go immediately. Like I was falling into darkness day one pretty much. And so I just had to learn to fly. But I would not advise it because it's a bit risky, because most businesses, as you know, typically fail. So you don't want to sort of jeopardize your financial well-being and be in that debt that I mentioned early on. But as you go, I mean, let's say it picks off with a little bit of a friends, family money. Let's say it picks off, and you're not going to waste their money and kind of go into bankruptcy day one. The next stage really is professional investors and VCs, like you mentioned, outward VC guys. And then, what then happens is you kind of initially are maybe in a kind of almost like an isolation if you don't have a network. And then as you start talking to these people, investors and fellow entrepreneurs, then all sorts of networks and the gates start to open basically, and people start introducing to other people. And this is kind of how it goes. And then before you know it, this network is pretty sizable, so you can actually take advantage of this and get to the next place where you need to be.
Did you know from day one it was going to work? Or did it just feel better over time? How was it as you built out the business?
With Monese, it felt such a crazy idea, and for example, when I started thinking about it, it was 2013. I remember that exact moment. It was summer 2013. I was on a holiday with my family, and it was such a ridiculous idea at the time. And keep in mind that in 2013, none of these neobanks really that you see today existed. There was nothing. There was just big banks doing their own thing, being not that great at doing their thing. So to me, when I started thinking of, okay, why is it so damn difficult to get an account in a new country, for example? Why is it so broken? Why is it so expensive? Surely it can be improved. Big aha moment for me was when I flew over to London, walked into a big bank and said, I want an account. They said no. So didn't make any sense to me. And when you check out these sort of the big bank websites in the UK, they say open to UK residents only. And the question is, why on earth is it UK residents only? Is it forbidden? Is the law saying no? Oh, it's not the case. It's just because the bank's inability to monetize people who don't sort of tick all the boxes, or onboard these people who don't tick all these boxes. So I thought there must be an opportunity there. It must be done. That will do it. And then, but it was 2013, right? So it took a couple of years before I actually could launch this thing. But I'm really thankful for early supporters and early investors who believed in this. And I must say, it was a pretty ridiculous idea, in 2013. But then 2015 happened, and it just exploded. So I'm really thankful about sort of the fact that I happened to be in the right place, right time. So timing could not be better. So it was a little bit of a luck there as well, because there are big shifts in the world, and that shift happened precisely where I was at the time as well.
What caused the shift?
I took advantage of that.
What caused the shift, do you think? Why in 2015 did it suddenly become? It was not like COVID. Now you can understand it. You can understand it right now, couldn't you? No one wants to go. Into that. What caused that moment?
The mobile revolution. I would say that basically banking was broken way before that, obviously, but mobile really started to kind of emerge a lot. And right now we're looking at you're taking your phone, you're holding it, you're checking your email and stuff. But before that, it really wasn't the case. I mean, desktop dominated massively. Mobile was still kind of emerging. And then I sensed that mobile is probably at some point going to really overtake web. It's going to dominate. And if that happens, why can't the bank be in your mobile phone? And I think that was a big aha moment for many, many people, because the speed of internet, the mobile revolution, it just made sense.
What was the hardest bit about setting up the business? Was it? I'm sure there's lots of licensing, and was it building the technology? Was it getting mentally prepared for it? What was the hardest part?
I think the hardest part really was to bring people out, basically drag people outside their little boxes. So it's people have, this weird sort of understandable kind of a, mindset, obviously, that some things that kind of exist already, that this is the way to go, and there's nothing that can be changed dramatically, right? This seems to be this sort of it's a safe, as I said before, the comfort zone is people that people really love that. And I say to this day, it is the hardest thing still, 7 years later, with this business, kind of opening people's minds and kind of showing them that there is a world outside a tiny box. It's still the biggest challenge 7 years later.
It's interesting. I find the same thing about, there's a lot of very talented people out there that can absolutely be entrepreneurs, but they've been told that they should be lawyers or they should be something else, and therefore don't think they're entrepreneurs. It's kind of interesting how people get, I want to say brainwashed, which is a bit hard, but definitely the system puts them inside a box, as you say, and yes, it's interesting that was the biggest challenge. I'm interested in your view whether you think entrepreneurs are born or bred.
To be honest, it's a little bit of both. Perhaps both probably are true, because some people are just, brave and bold, and they always seem to have ideas. And I happen to know some people like this. That doesn't mean that they are always successful. I've seen, failures and successes when entrepreneurs are born or bred. I'm bred, I think, because I really needed to push myself outside that box that I talked about earlier. I guess it also helps that I'm coming from this tiny country that was part of Soviet bloc many years ago, and coming from an environment where you don't have anything really, so you constantly need to be creative around how do you get clothing, how do you get basic stuff like food. So you have to basically do many things with very limited resources. So I think it was in my DNA, and that sort of a creativity I've carried with me, all the time. So I think it's bred that way.
Were your parents entrepreneurs?
No, not really. No, my mother was a teacher, and my father was basically he was working for what would you call it? It's kind of a like a council thing in that town. So there was nothing indicating really that I could ever be an entrepreneur. And to be honest, until I was basically just before I founded my first business, I think until that point, I honestly did not believe that I would ever become an entrepreneur. And I thought I thought the box I was putting myself in I'm a good web developer. All I want to do is that. I will never be a leader. I will never be able to confidently talk to people. All I want to do is somebody gives me a task, I execute this, and I was in a happy place, I guess. And I never thought I could be anything else.
It's interesting. And what do you think changed? Why did you suddenly realize you could be a CEO of a bank? What made you realize this?
And I guess that was a journey, right? So, I mean, initially I really sort of broke free from the debt that I had, sort of a credit card university debt. That was kind of a big aha moment. I started reading books. I did this my sort of a smaller businesses. Then I realized that bloody hell, I can, I've been in universities for like 10 plus years, mostly to avoid military service. But I did graduate. In London, and I got my degree. But it's not a master's degree. I actually wanted to do masters and maybe even PhD. But then I thought that's a waste of time, because at the time I was already kind of in this entrepreneurial mindset, and I realized that, if I can actually employ people who are smarter than me, and I can still be, a CEO or a leader, then smart people, they need a little bit of encouragement, and then you get the job done. You don't actually need to be the smartest person in the room.
It's interesting. 10 years in education is a long time. What was your degree in? What was that experience like for you?
I did. I swear I went to 3-4 different universities, but never graduated. So I studied law, nearly finished, got my degree, but I quit just before I got the degree. So I just didn't like law at all, but it has been enormously helpful in my later years, I must say. I studied economy as well, and then finally landed in computer science, basically, which I eventually graduated and finished, but I just didn't enjoy it at all, I must say. All I wanted to do is build a business, and I could not care less. But I thought, if I don't have that paper, I'm not going to be able to do much in my life. But I've got this paper still, literally behind me there somewhere, but I've never used it. Nobody has ever asked me. So I guess I don't want to say maybe this out loud, but I will say it anyway. So I think for me it was pretty much a waste of time, and all I learned from this sort of university was that how do you create a sort of a proper papers, and how do you do this in a way that is kind of looks good. That's pretty much it.
I can relate to what you're saying. I mean, I left school at 15, and I remember in my 20s always wishing I could say I went to Stanford, or I went to Harvard, or as if that proves that you are as smart as you think you are. It's interesting, isn't it? I think when you're younger, you think having a bit of paper will prove it. But
the opposite can also be true, right? So I mean, I've seen so many founders who are coming from, they're well educated, they have great degrees from great universities, and they have also been enormously successful. So you can't say that not having a degree or having a degree is giving you an advantage. It's not necessarily There's no equal. So it can be the one way or the other. But we have seen both, I guess, successes.
It's interesting. I've studied a lot on what companies' ethos is around investing, and there are some investment firms that will only invest in people that come out of Stanford or Harvard, and as you quite rightly say, I think people can come from all walks of life. I definitely think it's true. It's the kind of Mike Tyson analogy. You come from the streets, you would become quite a good fighter, right? If you have nothing, in a way, from an entrepreneur's perspective, it's all about making something from nothing. This idea you have today, this business you have, was all in your head. It was nothing to begin with, right? But
yeah, exactly.
But when you're building out a business, if advising people to start a business, what are the first few steps you think people should think about? Is there any quick tips there?
I guess really it makes sense to have a plan also. So sometimes you have this fantastic idea about creating something. I don't know, put a restaurant up, or sometimes it feels like doing something small is easy and low risk. But I would perhaps advise to think a little bit differently. So first of all, I guess it's however fascinating the idea may seem, really taking time to build a plan around it, kind of a little bit of boring financial stuff as well, is always an advantage, because you kind of need to, when you need to create like a 5-year plan and think of, you have to show it to your whoever is going to fund that journey. That kind of gives it more maturity, I would say. And second thing I would like to also encourage is, we all have 24 hours a day. So it's much more tempting to go after something small that gives you like a little bit of an income and kind of, like a family business kind of a thing. But is it going to be something you want to do, for the rest of your life? For example, if that answer is yes, then go for it. But other than that, if we all have the same 24 hours a day, it's proven that building something bigger actually takes exactly the same amount of effort. So why not kind of dream a little bigger, try to do something that actually enables you as a human being sort of to evolve, to develop, have a big impact and whatnot, because we all got the same amount of time.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, and I have tried to say this to people too. Sometimes it's actually easier to run a big company than a small company. You actually it's harder to get it there, but once you've got it there, you have more freedom. If you aren't in the office for a few days, it's not the end of the world. The company will run without you. Whereas when you have a small business, it's a lot harder actually. And so building something big, as you say, can also same amount of time. There's an argument. In fact, you buy time by making something bigger. You give yourself more impact, right? Back to your original 3 points, impact is so important. And so,
yeah, absolutely. And I feel like right now I'm kind of in a stage where for the first time, I guess I can, sometimes look at and not be kind of constantly putting out fires myself. And I can see actually team executing brilliantly. And if I would drop dead, again, death, right? So it's probably nothing dramatic. Business is gonna survive, right? So it's not gonna die. So it's a beautiful thing to watch if it actually gets to that level that regardless of you being there 16 hours a day or not, it's gonna actually it has life of its own.
I'd say it's the holy grail for entrepreneurs, as far as I'm concerned. You can build something that will last without you. That's the real testament of building something strong and exciting, I think. So that's hats off to you on that. You mentioned two things I wanted to ask you quickly. One was you co-founders. You've had in your first company two co-founders, I guess, the three of you, and then this business you founded on your own. How do you feel about the co-founder setup? Any thoughts on that? Any tips on that?
Yeah, I guess initially there is it can be fun thing to be on your own, right? Calling all the shots, picking up these sort of CEO titles and feeling good about yourself. But the fact is that if you have co-founders, it's just so much easier. If I could, I would have. If I could go back, I would have done this business also differently. I probably would have picked at least 2, 3, 4 co-founders. And if you're kind of a solo founder, first of all, people don't want to invest in you because you have to cover all your weaknesses by hiring from outside. I mean, it's just in the US particularly, it's some VCs don't even fund solo founder businesses, so you're gonna have so life is pretty it's pretty lonely as an entrepreneur and the CEO. So you really don't have many people to talk to or rely on. So it just makes sense to have a co-founder so you can share the burden. And burnout rates, when you look at the solo founders, it's insane. I mean, just the burden it's pretty big. So get a co-founder and try to complement your weaknesses. Don't get a person who is exactly like yourself.
I think that's great advice. Actually, I'm doing my first business on my own at the moment, and I actually miss the friendship of it. That almost like on the front line, fighting together. And bouncing off each other's energy. Because always have a down day and an up day, and if you have a co-founder, all my businesses in the past, except a couple actually, I've had a co-founder in recent times. So it really is quite powerful. I guess there's always time.
You've been lucky.
There's always time. There's always time. But it's definitely an interesting point, and it's interesting to hear it from someone who is a sole founder saying that. So it's very refreshing actually, because it's very easy to pitch that the way you've done it is the way to do it. So it's really refreshing and nice to hear a different perspective. And I guess I'm also interested in you mentioned earlier goals. You always set yourself goals. Tell us a little bit about what you've learned there.
So in terms of goal setting, I really started to take this stuff seriously. Also, kind of many years ago, and I started with, putting like a 10-year goal, 10-year kind of a vision where I wanted to be as a human being, and in a personal life and business life as well. And I've kind of broke it down to kind of a 5-year, kind of a 1-year level. And when you kind of break it down and you apply sort of the bigger themes, you want to have whatever, I don't know, kids, family, or you want to have a car, or you want your business to do X number of millions of revenue or something like that. When you actually write it down, and then it may even be absolutely ridiculous, but then you kind of on a daily basis, you look at this and you kind of try to execute in that direction. It can actually pretty easily become a reality. And I've had this. I mean, when I started this, it was laughable, right? So I basically literally printed it on my wall, put little pictures there as well, sort of the ideal that I wanted to have. And then, it was there maybe 6 months and didn't feel like it was going anywhere. Then I took it and put it in my drawer. And a year later, I, stumbled upon it, and I found that actually they have all become a reality. In many instances, some things are slightly delayed, but when they do realize that actually you can sometimes over-deliver your own kind of wildest dreams. So that taught me about goal setting, and it's important to have some sort of objective and sort of, where you need to go. Otherwise, you're going to be just sort of floating around, and that's a certain way not to end up in a place where you want to be.
I think it's such a good bit of advice there. Again, I hope my audience are picking up on that. I hope everyone right now who's listening is writing down their goals. I completely agree. If you don't write them down, you don't manifest them. I guess it's kind of, might not make it real. Your brain will tell you it's not possible, but if you write them down, somehow it does enforce that it's possible.
And in business as well. I mean, when you run a business, I mean, everything but I mean, at some point you have to write down a business plan. At some point you have to have a financial plan. And because, if you don't have a plan again, how are you gonna show to your own team, your investors, the outside world, what you're gonna do? What's the plan? Basically, is if you don't know what the plan is, and
how do you stay innovative? Considering, I know 2013 you were ahead of your time. 2015, you mentioned luck hit. We'll talk about luck in a minute. It hits, and the market is mature. It accepts what you're doing. It takes off. But today it feels like everyone's trying to do what you're doing. So how do you stay ahead? What's the innovative tip for people out there?
I guess it should really be the reality for most businesses. I think it's really, you look at the customers and what are the pain points? What are the customers vote with their feet? What are the problems? For example, even in this COVID environment, I mean, customers are behaving slightly differently than they did before. So spotting those trends, understanding what are the pain points for customers. So you figure out the solution, you make things easier, they're going to buy. That's always been the case, and and the bigger problem that you kind of find, the bigger is also the opportunity, and there is always going to be a little bit less competition there as well, because weirdly enough, you go to big problem world, and suddenly there is no competition because it's just too bloody difficult for most people. So they just get cold feet and they don't ever do it. And this is opportunity.
Mm. So you think innovation is talking to customers? I mean, it's an element, because I think back to what you were saying earlier, and I kind of get conflicted in my mind a bit. You ask a customer to do a thing that they're not used to, they probably say they don't want it. It's the Steve Jobs model, right? Which is basically like the customers don't know what they want. I'm going to give them what they want. I'm not going to, Henry Ford said, if I asked my customers what they want, they would have said a faster horse. My customers don't know what they want, and I'm going to give it to them, or ask customers what they want. Because they're voting with their feet, you've got to keep an eye on it. So is there a balance as a leader in innovation?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not even perhaps saying that you should actually, we do talk to our customers quite a lot. We do surveys and all that, but I don't think the innovation comes from that. I think it's if you just look at the patterns that are kind of emerging with the way people behave, and if they have a problem, then identifying that problem, I guess, is and you can actually do this without asking people what they want, because they almost always give you a wrong answer, to be honest. It's innovation. Perhaps innovation should probably not come, as you said, from asking people if they want kind of a faster horse.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting problem, I think, in as businesses evolve as well. Where do you get the innovation from? I always remember the Yahoo story where they tried to buy Facebook. So they tried to buy in the innovation. They knew it was coming. They were aware how something like Facebook could change the landscape. They tried to buy it. They offered $1 billion, but it wasn't enough, right? So, I mean, do you think that's a reasonable strategy? If people out there with businesses today, a lot of the audience have a business and they're thinking about how to survive in a COVID world. I mean, what do you think about buying in innovation? Is it you've got to have it internally as a mindset, do you think?
I mean, there are companies who are, getting better and better every year by acquiring other companies, and whether this is something that I think there is a good way how you can buy the innovation, how you can buy a company that has sort of a fantastic, talented people in there. There are right ways of doing this, but I've also seen many failures. When I look at, for example, in my own space, that I've seen that sort of some early attempts have been bought up by some big banks, and they have turned these companies into dust. So there is many things that can go wrong, but I think ultimately, if you as a business, you want to kind of acquire talent or become more innovative by acquiring another team or doing things like this, then I think it's really makes sense to sort of really think about it in a deeply, and understand also that if that team or talent that you're going to be kind of taking on board, then what does it take to actually keep these people around, and whether it's sort of a golden handcuffs and kind of keeping them on board for a couple of years. Or is it actually making, not actually changing the dynamics of that business that much, and perhaps kind of giving them the ability to fly with the new org the same way as they flew before. But I think it's more possible to get it wrong, I think, than to get it right. So I'm not a big believer in sort of buying innovation as such, but it can work.
Just feels like quite a fast-moving space you're in now, so innovation must be permanently on your mind. Staying relevant. Sorry, very professional podcast. My dog starts barking. This is the problem with doing podcasts from home now. Barking dogs. Sorry, folks. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely an interesting subject. I was looking at how Instagram continued to be successful when Facebook bought them, and a big part of it was it was two entrepreneurs talking. First of all, I think that helps, and then allowing the entrepreneurs at Instagram to continue to run it with autonomy. Yeah. And I think, to your point, that's sometimes the best way, let them do what they need to do. Don't stifle their innovation, which is what happened at Vine when Twitter bought Vine, right? I mean, it should have been TikTok. Vine should have been TikTok, but it got corrupted by the Twitter infrastructure. So definitely fascinating. Look, I could talk to you forever. You have a big business to run. So I'm going to let you go. One final question just before we end. If you went back to your younger self and gave some advice, what would it be?
start earlier and try to avoid having a full-on family with mortgages and all that stuff. Basically, do the business, start the business first, and then create everything else. That would be enormously helpful, because if you start later with all the burden, sort of I'm not saying burden, but I mean it's just so much more difficult, because you have to then split your time, your wallet, and all that stuff. So I would tell myself start sooner. And the second advice I would give myself is do not start a financial services business. It's just too damn hard.
Oh, very honest of you. Yeah. Well, okay. I don't think your younger self is going to listen, by the way, and I hope he doesn't, because we wouldn't be sitting here today hearing about the amazing things that you've done. So, but fascinating. Thanks for sharing. I'm going to sum up a few things that I've taken from today's podcast. I love what you mentioned earlier about pushing through fear, leaning into it. I feel like you almost revel in it now. The risk piece is almost like, you love it. You love the risk piece, which I think is such a wonderful thing to embrace. So I love the point. I love this whole idea that you said, what's the worst that can happen? It sounds morbid in a way, embracing death, but I actually think there's something really powerful in it and very liberating. And I take that from what you've mentioned. I really love the kind of measure of success that the good people couldn't agree more. I wish more people would hire good people, and makes your life more enjoyable and gives a much more positive vibe to the business. I absolutely love it. I think freedom, which is my favorite saying in Braveheart, one of my favorite movies, freedom, absolutely, people need to experience it once in their life, even if it doesn't work as a business, that the freedom you can have to make your own mission, your own vision, and hire good people. Ironically, they connect, right? I love that. I think this kind of the choice of risk you mentioned, that which ties into freedom, but that ability to take the risk that you want to take, that's just so powerful. And then the impact piece, which I think I want to say comes over time, because you can make an impact as you get better at what you're doing. But those those three things, good people, freedom, and impact, is such a powerful combination. I hope people write it down and keep it for when they're building their own businesses. You apply it. I think it's so powerful. And having nothing is sometimes a good thing. It teaches you to be an entrepreneur. Your background that we mentioned in Estonia and how you grew up. I know a lot of people out there right now having it hard. They don't have a lot. But I think from that, I had nothing as well. At 15, I left home with nothing. I actually think that made me successful, because I had nothing to lose. But equally, you learn to be innovative, as you mentioned, Norris, which I think is so true. So, I'm not saying that if you've got a lot, you can't also do something with that. That's a different type of superpower. But having nothing can also be incredibly powerful and create such innovation. I guess this is just a personal thing, but I concur with Norris, so I'm going to say it. I do think have a co-founder. It might not be for everyone, but I actually like Norris's point on this, and my own experience I can correlate. I think having a co-founder can cover your weaknesses easier. And I do think that it allows you to have more fun with the business quite often. So I think get a co-founder is a good bit of advice, but of course it might not be for everyone. But I took that from what Norris has said today. And of course, set yourself goals. Put it down in paper and make them big, audacious goals. Why not? Because it really is true what Norris is saying. I think I wish that I was told this when I was 15. It's easier to build a big company than a small company. It sounds counterintuitive, but actually it's true. And you can have a bigger impact. You can hire more good people, and you get even more freedom. So it all links together. But that's what I took away from you today, Norris. I want to thank you for your time.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you, listeners. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Good Luck Club podcast today. I hope you found what Norris had to say useful. We want to interview the world's most successful entrepreneurs so that they share their knowledge with you, so you can go out there and build a purposeful business and enjoy your day to day. If you found what Norris had to say useful, then I'd really appreciate it if you clicked his business link down below and went and followed him on social media. And if you're feeling really generous, maybe go and open up an account and experience the seamless service that he has created. I want to thank you again for listening to today's Good Luck Club podcast. We know you have thousands of podcasts you could be listening to. We feel extremely lucky that you took the time to listen to ours.